Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.
Everybody says folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just people all over the world. Folks who live, folks got to give, folks got to care, folks got to share. Our world is small, so very small. What touches one of us, who touches us all? To stay alive, just to survive, folks got to be in harmony. Everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks, everybody just folks, just plain old folks, just plain old folks. Everybody just folks.
Hello, everyone. I'm Rob Hinton, and I'd like to welcome you to Folks. This coming Wednesday, June 26th at 8 p.m., PBS, the Public Broadcasting Service, will air a 2-hour rebuttal to its critically acclaimed series, Vietnam: A Television History. Now, this move marks the first time that PBS has given a major block of prime time to viewer complaints about a single series. The rebuttal program is titled Vietnam Op-Ed, an Inside Story Special. It'll include a 1-hour film entitled Television's Vietnam: The Real Story. Now, Television's Vietnam: The Real Story was produced for Accuracy in Media, a media watchdog group, by Dr. Peter Rollins, an English professor at Oklahoma State University and a Vietnam veteran. He is my guest today, along with Dr. David Culbert, a history professor at LSU. Gentlemen, welcome to Folks. Well, we all thought that the Vietnam War ended 10 years ago, but it looked like we're going to see a new battleground here on PBS come Wednesday.
Well, Rob, it's 1985, and we're 10 years away from the 1975 fall of Saigon, which for most people marks the end of American involvement in the Indochina War. And after a decade, it's time to go back, look things over, reevaluate what we know about that tragic war, and perhaps even, while thinking about the facts of the war, think about various interpretations of it. And the purpose of television's Vietnam: The Real Story, that will be shown a week from today, will be to look at a very intense and interesting series by PBS called Vietnam: A Television History. Accuracy in Media and many other people felt that this particular series had a lot of problems with the facts and with interpretation. So, as I say, this is a time to think about Vietnam, but it's also a time to think about how we think about Vietnam.
Before we get further involved in our discussion, I think we should find out what Accuracy in Media is, what it does. And for that, we have a tape interview with Reed Irvine, founder and chairman of Accuracy in Media.
Well, Accuracy in Media is usually described as a media watchdog organization. I'd like to emphasize that it's a grassroots citizens organization. It was started in 1969 with $200, and it has grown to be, I think, a rather influential group with a membership approaching 40,000 and a budget of $1.5 million a year. It doesn't monitor the media in the sense of scrutinizing everything that is printed or broadcast in this country, but it does investigate complaints of serious media errors, of distortions, of unfair programs, and it tries to get something done in those cases where it thinks that there is really a serious problem, that something wrong has been perpetrated by a newspaper, a magazine, or a broadcaster. It does this in a variety of ways by contacting the people responsible and appealing to their consciences and to their sense of journalistic ethics. It also finds in many cases it has to expose the wrongdoing before as wide an audience as it can reach. We have taken out ads, full-page ads in newspapers such as the New York Times and the Washington Post to do this. We also have an extensive publishing program of our own, putting out our newsletter that goes out to our approximately 40,000 members, through a weekly newspaper column that reaches a very large audience, and through daily radio commentaries, which also are carried by about 100 radio stations around the United States. We also have a very active speakers program. We give 400 to 500 talks a year, and our also very actively involved in giving radio and television interviews.
That was Reed Irvine, chairman of Accuracy in Media. Needless to say, the Vietnam War was a controversial war, and it's still a controversial topic. Many media critics, however, think that the 13-part PBS series is the most comprehensive TV history to date on the war. Although there's been a lot of criticism from the right, from the left, from Vietnamese communities throughout the country. What did you see wrong, Dr. Culbert, with the PBS series?
I certainly do not consider the series a disaster from beginning to end, but it's a series which was made by a number of hands, and some programs are very distorted and very, very biased, particularly the program The War at Home, which correctly is one that comes under a special attack, and the program which Accuracy in Media has made by way of rebuttal. Over 13 hours, it's not surprising that some of these programs are stronger than others, but the first program takes mighty whacks at French colonialism, reflecting the prejudices of a French producer. Second program beats the British over the head, reflecting the prejudices of a British producer, and once the Americans get in, then they whack at the Americans. I'd say the most serious shortcomings that I feel are an overall shortcoming throughout all 13 programs is, first of all, the projection that Ho Chi Minh is truly godlike. He is a stereotyped paragon of virtue, that President Diem is a fall guy, a stooge, and that the South Vietnamese are venal, corrupt, and wholly lacking in human motivation. I think that these are really ridiculous prejudices that inform the entire series. And you might wonder at this point what's good about it, but I'll leave that to a later moment.
The series first aired in the fall of '83. WGBH, the producing station, made revisions before the second broadcast. Are you saying, Dr. Rollins, that those revisions didn't go far enough?
Well, it is true that WGBH made a few revisions in the series, I think a total of 6. However, they were pretty much cosmetic changes, with one exception, for reasons which I don't quite understand, and in conflict with every existing history of Vietnam, including histories written by communist authors. The series asserts that a very famous non-communist nationalist rebellion called the Yen Bai Rebellion was inspired by Ho Chi Minh. That's probably the most significant change that they corrected. Why did they correct it? They corrected it because there were demonstrations by thousands of Vietnamese in San Diego, Houston, New Orleans, Washington, D.C., London, and Paris, France. The refugees around the world just went berserk when they heard this, and I believe it's episode 3 of the series. So there was one significant change. And one of the things that Accuracy Media tries to get into is probing a number of the other factual and interpretive errors of the PBS series. Professor Culbert of Louisiana State has mentioned a few, and those are 2 themes that we get into in some depth. We also get into the treatment of the Vietnam veteran and of our POWs in the PBS series. We feel that the Vietnam veteran is portrayed as a druggie, as someone who probably could shoot his officers and staff NCOs at will, and really didn't understand why he was there. Now, the facts are that in 1983, when WGBH aired the series, there was at hand and available to them a Harris survey, not a Harris poll, but a Harris survey, a very in-depth study of public opinion. And that survey would have told GBH, had they consulted it, that 91% of the Vietnam veterans reported that they were glad that they had served their country, and that 61% of the Vietnam veterans said that they would serve again if asked. And so we get into this disparity between the image of the Vietnam veteran as it appears in the series and the actual attitude and success in civilian life of Vietnam veterans after the Vietnam War.
So how do you account for all the acclaim that this series has gotten? If the people in the booth can give me fonts number 52 through 54, the Organization of American Historians found it an outstanding television program dealing with American history. The New England Historical Association commended WGBH, the producing station, for creating this thought-provoking, sensitive account of the complex Vietnam episode and for information and illuminating content, profuse and imaginative documentation, and its historical responsibility. How do you account for all of this acclaim?
Okay, and then this is, I think, Rob, this is a good point. The series won a great number of awards from historical organizations. We address this issue in our program, and we take the following position, that the people who made the series, and perhaps even the historians who presented the award, have a vested interest in freezing history. That is, supporting an interpretation of history which freezes the interpretation of the war in terms of concepts which were very popular in the 1960s, concepts in terms of which these very historians and producers themselves may have made life-important, life-critical decisions, whether to serve or not to serve, and so on. Now, Professor Culbert, it's good to have him here. He was the chairman of the OAH committee, which presented the award to the PBS series, so I think we have someone we can deal with as a primary source on this topic. Why don't we turn the question to him?
What do you think?
That is, I think people should understand that I was chairman of the prize committee of the Organization of American Historians, whose award is now cited by WGBH as an example of the acclaim that the program has achieved. It's worth noting that WGBH still does not know how to spell the name of Eric Barnow, the most distinguished media historian in the United States, that they alone of all persons who received awards from the OAH neglected to send anybody, so that I received the award I presented, that I had to write to Ellison 3 times to ask him as a kindness to send a perfunctory note of thanks to the OAH for having received the award, so that it's certainly useful that at a later date WGBH has finally discovered that this award is something that they feel a great deal of inspiration about, but I should certainly say that I was not overwhelmed by their response from WGBH when I had to write them asking them to do their homework.
I take it you guys don't like WGBH all that much, huh?
I would like to comment on that, but
well,
I think
let
you
me
should finish
just
the point.
say briefly that the quotation, like all taken out of context, since I wrote the statement of award for the WGBH series, it's worth noting that I carefully said that the series did not strike me as being without fault. Naturally, they do not quote that part. I thought, and my committee members thought, that this was a pioneering effort at serious television programming for PBS to sponsor 13 hours on the Vietnam War, when in the classroom 1 hour is likely to dull many a student's interest, was a courageous step, or perhaps a stupid step. But in any event, there are, as I say, programs within the 13 hours which I consider to be very, very effective and very well done. But in evaluating the series as a whole, there are indeed serious criticisms which have to be made. And some of the very weakest of the programs are those that come at the end. And I think that criticism of the series, it's impossible to deal with a 13-hour series and not find that there are certain inconsistencies and certain problems.
Do you find the PBS series a useful tool in the classroom? I know it is being used in some classrooms.
I certainly would be willing to use that in the classroom, but what I would most want to do is, now that Peter has made this first-rate rebuttal, is to use one program from the WGBH series and then rent from Accuracy in Media the rebuttal. And this extremely interesting new book by James Benarian, which I just got in the mail, it's been reprinted, and it's rare that I get a book and sit down and read it right through the night, but that was the level of my interest. And Mr. Benarian's book, Losers Are Pirates, is in fact, in part, indulges in overstatement, but really does make serious criticisms of the historical shortcomings of the WGBH series. And there is nothing that I think is more interesting than to let students take a look at what all the arguments about, rather than listening to my assertions, which may or may not be taken as worthy. So I'm very, very impressed with the objectivity and the quality of this rebuttal that has been made by Accuracy in Media, and I think the program's going to do a great deal to dissipate cheap shots that have been leveled at AIM as though this is an organization of ridiculous right-wing crackpots that want to bomb the whole planet in the Stone Age. And the accusations raised by those who don't know very much about accuracy in media certainly suggest that somebody is trying to shout criticism out of existence.
The rebuttal program, I bet Reed Irvine is in hog heaven about this coming Wednesday night. Can you tell us how this project came to be?
I must say, I find it difficult to imagine Reed Irvine being in hog heaven, but on a show like Folks, I guess that's the right metaphor. Well, let me say this. In terms of GBH and the historical authenticity of the series, a number of the people who served as consultants to WGBH are in our program, are in our rebuttal program. And there are many historians who were used on the list of authorities to obtain grant funds who were then not used in the production of the program. And these people came to us, called us, or visited us, and said, hey, there's something wrong with this series, and someone should do something about it. So some of the complaints that we had were not just from Vietnam refugees, not just from Vietnam veterans, but actual historians who were involved in the WGBH project itself. And we've been talking about the Vietnam veteran, and I brought along a clip that you might want to show your audience.
Yes, tell us a little bit about what we're going to be seeing in your film, particularly this little bit we're going to
Well,
show.
we feel that the Vietnam veteran, we've talked about that, but the POWs are mistreated in the PBS series as well. The most egregious case is the case of Robinson Reisner, lives in Austin, Texas today, and he is shown talking about his experience as a prisoner of war, how he was tortured and how he succumbed, gave information of some sort, not very important information, I guess. And he is intercut, that is, they cut back and forth with the story of a Viet Cong woman who claims that she was tortured and had electrodes put on sensitive parts of her body and was under a great amount of pain, but didn't give in to this pain because she believed so much in the communist cause. Well, this juxtaposition carries the message that the Americans are weak without a moral cause in the war, and of course they couldn't hold up, whereas the Viet Cong are real heroes, are terrific people. What we're going to see is a former POW, now a Congressman, John McCain, talking about how PBS treated the POWs and the unfairness of that treatment. Okay, here's a preview of television's Vietnam, the real story.
In relation to PBS, I think that it was unfortunate that this series did not give the attention it deserved of the way that the Vietnamese manipulated the American POWs for propaganda purposes. The Vietnamese captured Americans for one reason and one reason alone, to use for propaganda purposes, which would then help them to negotiate in the kind of agreement they wanted with the Americans so that they could win a victory in Indochina, including Laos and Cambodia, which they did. People like Ramsey Clark, Jane Fonda, and others who came to Hanoi, met with the same 7 POWs, came back and told what can only be described as falsehoods about the American POWs and their conditions, did a great disservice to America and our efforts in Indochina. Great service to the Vietnamese in their efforts to win, because Ho Chi Minh in 1965 said, we won't win the war in the battlefields of Indochina, we'll win the war in the streets of San Francisco, Detroit, New York, and Washington, D.C. They helped him do that.
Your film has not gone without criticism either. Some say it was poorly made and not especially persuasive, and that it's virtually impossible for the average viewer with no special interest in the controversy to view the changes in your film against the original presentation. Your reaction to that? Well,
I've read a number of reviews of our program. I think 90% of the reviews that I've read are by people who haven't seen the program, so I have a lot of trouble with some of the criticism. It's also, and I hear the question of attitude toward WGBH. I grew up in Boston and donated to GBH over the years, and it's kind of an interesting change of image. It used to be a aspiring small station trying to get along. Now it's a great monolith, a big, powerful institution, and it really resents criticism. And a lot of the criticism has been generated by WGBH itself, of course, self-serving. I read in the Wall Street Journal, for example, on Monday, a description of our program as malodorous and needing ventilation by the 2-hour package within which it is being put a week from today.
Following the film, there's going to be a roundtable discussion. Will this be a discussion with varying views or views sort of toward Ames' point of view?
Well, our program will be shown within a 2-hour package put together by Inside Story, which was a series on PBS a few years back. I thought an excellent series. And the senior producer, Ned Schneerman, has been given the assignment to sort of act as a referee between WGBH, inaccuracy, and media in this debate. And so there will be some explanation of what the PBS, what we call the PBS series was. There'll be some description of accuracy in media. Our program will be shown. Then Inside Story sent out correspondents to interview other experts who would evaluate both the AIM program and the PBS series. And then that will be followed at the conclusion of the show with about 18 minutes of roundtable discussion with people from a great variety of points of view. There will be a Vietnamese refugee. There's a military tactician. There's a fellow named Peter Braystrip, who's very well known for his 2-volume work, The Big Story, Analysis of Press Reporting in Vietnam. Richard Salant, former president of CBS News, will participate. Lawrence Lichty, who was an archival film researcher for GBH in the pre-production phase of the 13-part effort, will participate, and they'll go at it. In fact, they've already done it. It was live on tape on Monday. And I guess quite an interesting sifting and evaluating of both the GBH series and of our program, neither of which, by the way, is perfect.
GBH, the producing station, was invited to participate in the panel discussion, but they declined. But they have put together this 43-page rebuttal I'm sure you're familiar with. And I want to, and the producers say that less than 1/4 of the program deals with statements of fact that can be verified or refuted. Most of the remainder consist of assertions that they say are, by their very nature, unanswerable. And these assertions fall into 3 categories, and if I can get the people to give me fonts 55 through 57. First, the program makes sweeping, non-specific specific charges that are without documentation. Second, the program contains statements of personal opinion about the series that perhaps represents the individual's true beliefs but have no value or evidence. And third, the AIM program contains comments that have no relationship to the series.
Well, I've seen this 43-page so-called rebuttal. Actually, it's more of a collage of quotations without any narrative thread to string it together. And I've put together a 20-page single-spaced response to this rebuttal. I don't know where they got these categories of analysis. I think they had a student intern from one of the Boston junior colleges working at GBH who put this rebuttal together. At least that's my impression of the intellectual rigor that went into it. In any case, it's hard to respond to the categories that they have. I'll give you an example. We open our show with an extended statement by Douglas Pike, who's the world's expert on the Viet Cong and the Vietnam military, the world's expert. He is in charge of the Indochina Archive at the University of California at Berkeley. He's written 4 books on the subject, and he goes into great detail on the historical, methodological weaknesses of the series in great depth. He was one of their consultants. He feels that they did not exercise methodological rigor, and he goes into this in some detail. They classify this as a statement of opinion by someone that could be right or wrong. Well, that's not a statement of opinion that could be right or wrong. This man is the world's expert on the subject that he is discussing, and you just can't dismiss criticism and say, well, that's an opinion of an individual. We don't have to answer it. They refuse to answer it. They say, well, it doesn't matter. We have opinions. They have opinions. A very strange way to respond. I'd say a kind of a non-response. Now, Professor Culbert is a distinguished historian and media comments, and maybe he'd like to comment on that.
You know, there's been a lot of verbal exchanges about the series. What does this say about the television documentary?
The WGBH rebuttal does not strike me as a strong rebuttal. I should say, too, that since I have no direct involvement in the accuracy and media response, that I merely evaluate this as someone who teaches Vietnam media in Vietnam, been involved in this sort of stuff professionally for about 15 years now. I think that the accuracy and media program, in fact, is very good. It's sharp. In a sense, rather than directly respond to what you just proposed, I'd like to say something slightly different, which I think is germane. That is that it's really extraordinary that PBS has the intellectual courage to allow a formal rebuttal to a series that PBS funded to be aired. I view this as one of the most exciting and important and overdue changes. I hope it's a permanent, institutionalized change in public affairs broadcasting that we've seen.
We're running out of time, but some people think that PBS is opening up a Pandora's box by doing this.
I disagree because, first of all, it's certainly not going to be the case that every group can put together such an intelligent program, and if it weren't for ridiculous prejudices in the original series, why would people have been so offended? Why did PBS get 500 letters of complaint, more than it's ever gotten from any other series?
Okay. Our time has run out for today. I'd like to thank Dr. Rollins and Dr. Culbert for being with us today. Again, the Inside Story special airs this coming Wednesday here on LPB at 8 p.m. We hope that you tune it in and that you join us again next week right here on Folks. Bye-bye.
Funding for the production of Folks is provided in part by the Friends of LPB.